From the dark side of technology to oppression under totalitarian regimes, environmental catastrophes, and the loss of individualism, we just can't get enough of dystopian themes. For decades, the popularity of dystopian fiction has been on the rise. In 2017, George Orwell's 1984 topped Amazon's bestseller list, despite being almost 70 years old. And when Suzanne Collins's 2008 novel, The Hunger Games, was released, it appeared on the New York Times bestseller list for more than 5 consecutive years. I wonder, why are we so fascinated by dystopian literature? Dystopian literature is a type of speculative fiction, a genre that departs from reality as we know it and allows for endless possibilities. But first, let's back up a little. What even is a dystopia? Well, a dystopia is an imagined state where life for the average person is fearful and terrible, and there is great suffering within the society or community. The worst has already happened. Now, many of you might think of giant dinosaur-esque monsters, mushroom-infected zombies, or alien invasions, but there are key differences between this type of apocalyptic fiction and a dystopia. From the outside, a dystopian society might often appear to be quite stable. But behind the curtain, it's suffering under extreme oppressive ideals. I decided to find out a little more about our dystopian fascination.
Dystopian fiction often focuses as the underlying message on the societal and political structures and the effects that they have on individuals and groups, where the apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic fiction more kind of looks at a micro level, the immediate struggle for survival in the face of catastrophic events.
In dystopian literature, think mass surveillance or technology gone wrong, not zombies. In the words of dystopian writer Margaret Atwood, speculative fiction could really happen. It's the world we live in, but with a terrible twist. Today, dystopias are common in literature, but surprisingly, it's a relatively new phenomenon, with the first modern dystopian novel emerging only in the early 20th century, although the concept has been around for much longer. In 1516, the term utopia was coined by writer Thomas More to describe a place too good to be true and devoid of any conflict. Sounds nice, right? But then, in 1868, English philosopher and economist John Stuart Mill made a speech in the House of Commons and used the term dystopia to describe something too bad to be practicable. It was the first public use of the word, the antithesis to Thomas More's perfect utopia. And within the next 70 or so years, early dystopian books like Jack London's The Iron Heel and Yevgeny Zamyatin's We would be published, setting up tropes that are found in the genre to this day. What's interesting about dystopian literature is that despite being speculative, the stories are often based on truth. They're a mirror into the world today.
It critiques a lot of the current societal norms or the current societal problems, but pushes them to the extremes. So totalitarianism, severe class disparity, a loss of individual freedoms.
Essentially, dystopian literature toes the line of being unimaginably dark while also presenting relevant issues. In 1949, writer George Orwell published one of the most well-known and influential dystopian novels ever written, 1984, which follows protagonist Winston Smith, a man living in Oceania, a totalitarian state where Big Brother is always watching. The book explored a bleak outcome of the technological advancements happening at the time, a time of incredible growth. Just 3 years prior to the book's release, only 44,000 homes in the US had a television, but by 1949, they were in more than 4 million. In the book, Big Brother monitors citizens' behaviors and thoughts through listening devices and telescreens that watch a person's every move, and punishes individuals who show any sign of free thought. Orwell couldn't have known that his predictions would turn out to be quite so accurate. But 1984 did feature plenty of his own real-life experiences. The book was written in the shadow of World War II, So the scarcity of goods, unappealing food, and bombing raids featured in the story were all near memories for people at the time. The plot didn't only serve as a fictionalized commentary, it was a warning to not repeat mistakes of the past. And this is a common theme in dystopian literature. The genre invites us to think about how current or historical actions or decisions might shape the future, and urges us to make different choices. In recent years, there has been a big shift in the demographic that dystopian literature is targeted to. Early dystopian literature was typically aimed at adults, but today, that isn't always the case. In 2008, a book was released that was a game changer: The Hunger Games. And although it wasn't the first dystopian novel written from a teenage perspective, it did overwhelmingly shift the focus of dystopian literature from adults to young adults. The book and its 2 follow-up sequels took the world by storm, becoming giant bestsellers, with more than 100 million copies in print worldwide, and triggering a young adult dystopian boom. Chances are, if you've not read the Hunger Games trilogy, you've seen one of the blockbuster film adaptations. But I wonder, why is a story about a ruthless government forcing its country's children to fight to the death while broadcasting the entire thing on television so appealing to young people?
The processes that are kind of going on automatically in our brain all the time are survival processes. There's part of the brain that's always thinking about just keeping you safe. All I'm going to do here is make sure that I keep you alive. And to the brain, it doesn't matter that it's fiction.
Dystopian literature allows us to play out our deepest, darkest anxieties from the safety of a world that we already know how to navigate. We can delve into and explore real-life issues without risk, confronting reality at the same time as escaping it. And because dystopias aren't crawling with non-existent monsters, they're just close enough to real that we are left with a sense that it could really happen. Interestingly, there has been a link between the popularity of dystopian literature and periods of profound change. And the surge of the 2000s dystopian literature could be in response to anxieties following major global events, like the 2008 recession, along with climate change and the accelerating rise of technology. So it almost comes as no surprise that the genre is alluring to the younger generation. They are the first to have 24/7 access to the internet, exposing them to on-demand information about the world outside of their immediate view. And more often than not, it's bad news that dominates the headlines. But it isn't all bad. There's often a sense of hope attached to the dystopian novels of today. Since 2008, at least a sizable portion of dystopian literature centers around a younger protagonist battling against an authoritarian regime, usually resulting in that regime's downfall. Researchers showed an increase in people's consuming post-apocalyptic media during the COVID-19 pandemic, with many saying that it helped them feel better about the current climate. People are reaching for dystopian fiction during real global events to help them anticipate what's next.
It gives us, in a strange way, a sense of empowerment. And so you have these bleak settings that are just extrapolations of what we're already experiencing in some sense. But again, we see characters rising above. We see some shred of hope. We see that there are groups of people who do come together and bring out the best of humanity.
It's also easy to see why young adult audiences would bond with the independent, ambitious, and revolutionary protagonists, like the Hunger Games' Katniss Everdeen.
I volunteer as tribute.
They reflect an all too familiar need for freedom and a desire to push back against boundaries.
Dystopian fiction is looking at a critical analysis of those current sociological trends and political trends and issues that we're struggling with in a macro sense and extrapolating them to the future. And young adults are really thinking about their future. They're starting to be functioning adults in the world, and they're aware of societal issues and thinking about, how am I going to operate in this world, and what kind of impact am I going to make on the world, and what kind of impact is the world going to make on me?
It doesn't seem as though our appetite for the genre is going to slow down anytime soon. But I think Margaret Atwood puts it perfectly. It's a sad commentary on our age that we find dystopias a lot easier to believe in than utopias. But by reading about them, we might just be inspired to work towards a better future than those presented in dystopian novels, to question the status quo, and to strive for a more utopian society. Let us know your favorite dystopian novels in the comments section. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Scope, a new series where we delve into the hottest topics in media and culture and uncover the essential information that you need to really understand them. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. See you next time.